Quiet Place Part 2 continues to rock, and I finally got a chance to see it. Now, Quiet Place Part 2 opened in the States on May 28th, but it's had a little bit of a slower rollout here in Canada. It's been out for a few weeks, but I finally put on the masks and went out to go and see A Quiet Place Part 2. I loved the first movie. It was written and directed and starred John Krasinski and his wife, Emily Blunt, and a bunch of kids that were all terrific, and it's incredibly thrilling and scary. And A Quiet Place Part 2, I think, picks up the baton quite nicely and takes the universe of the film in some interesting new ways. We're introduced to different characters sort of outside of the family and the kind of intimate world and portrait that we got in the first film, which I think is understandable. When you're building sequels, you want to kind of do the world building part of it. And I think that it's effectively captured. It's just such familiar territory with the Walking Dead TV show and the Last of Us video games and the copious amounts of dystopian, nightmares that we choose to call entertainment, which is kind of strange in a world that sort of feels a little dystopian right now, still, but it's really well presented, and there is a kind of a Last of Us cinematic vibe there was in the first movie as well. You really believe in the family, and you believe in the environments and the world that's built for this family to survive in. It's all about monsters that are blind or don't, rely on vision to see the humans, which they just mercilessly kill and I guess eat. They use as food, similarly to the monsters that we just saw in the Tomorrow War. But they have an incredible sense of sound, and that evokes a little bit of the clicker reality that we have in the Last of Us games as well. And so everybody has to be deathly quiet in these movies, and you also feel that way when you're in the theater watching this movie. Like every sound, every rustle of popcorn bag, every squeak of chair takes you out of the experience a little bit, because you're just like, don't make a sound. Everybody has to be quiet. Now, they did an excellent job of taking us into this quiet space by having people that were deaf in the film and using sign language. And I think that made for some really fantastic character choices, but there was a practicality to that, right? The family knows how to sign to each other, and there's a great deal of trust and respect and concern and care for each other based on individuals with their inability to hear what's going on around them or to hear the sounds that they themselves are making. And you have that empathetic vibe as you're watching this movie, because this really brave girl can't hear the sound that she might be giving off, and she can't hear when the monsters are creeping up behind her. And so there are a lot of jump scares that are effective, and there's a lot of fantastic audio work in this film. I do have to say, though, that I watched it in a kind of an empty theater, which is understandable. It's been out for a few weeks, but also everybody's playing COVID safe right now. So there was like 5 other people in the theater, which made me more comfortable to be out in a theater, quite frankly. But it removed a little bit of that audience participation, which you want out of a big epic horror experience like this, or a thriller experience like this. And also the fidelity of the screen. I've been watching, and playing games and stuff on my television for years now, but over this last year, it has become my portal to escapism in a pretty grand way. And I've streamed lots of blockbuster films and lots of incredible streaming shows and stuff. And my fidelity on my OLED is pretty damn good. And it was a little weird. I was not in the biggest theater at this multiplex that I went to, and so the screen wasn't that large, but it was also not that crisp. And so it was a little blurry, and the audience really wasn't there, and the chair just over my left shoulder was creaking every time the person was adjusting their chair. And it wasn't their fault. It was just part of the theater. But you know what I'm saying? It took me out of the fear of the film. And so my thinking is that the movie is really well crafted. It's perhaps, understandably less shocking. And I don't feel for the new characters in the same way that I felt for Krasinski and Emily Blunt working together to try to keep their family alive. That was very powerful in the first film. It was less satisfying, I think, contextually and with the character choices and the world-building choices than the intimacy of the first film, but coupled with my less than stellar and optimum, theatrical viewing experience, I feel like this is something that will play very nicely for you if you can get your family members and your cohabitants in your house to just be quiet and watch this at home. And I'm sure it's coming home very soon because release things are all shifting and changing all the time. I definitely think you should see this movie. It really doesn't stand apart without seeing the first one, though, and I think that the first Quiet Place film is better than this, but this was very entertaining. I'm going to give A Quiet Place Part 2 an 8 out of 10.